here we get to the main portion of this deck, like its whole strength. Carrion Feeder. It can't block, so if you're like sometimes you might misplay and think that it can block and leave it back, but it can't block. So make sure you understand that, and there's no reason not to attack it unless you're just it's gonna die going in. It's not quite as strong without you can't since you can't keep damage on the stack anymore, but it's still quite strong because its strength usually comes when they try to cast removal on one of your creatures, and then you basically get a 1/1 every time they try to cast removal. And the other one is Nantuko Husk. This one's different in the sense that it doesn't get stronger over time like the Carrion Feeder. If you're doing calculations with this, if you think you're going to be able to attack twice with this Carrion Feeder, it's better to put the 1/1 counter on it, even though it can't block, than the Nantuko Husk, because that'll be equivalent of damage. And then if it's 3, then if you're going to attack 3 times, then the Carrion Feeder it's better to sack with. So yeah, just in case you're doing calculations and trying to figure this out. Nantuko Husk really gives this deck a lot of explosive power. Because it turns all your creatures into 2/2, and a lot of people don't realize that you can kill them that turn when you attack them with Nantuko Husk, because they won't block with it. So usually you can get a bunch of like game wins that you maybe shouldn't have just because Nantuko Husk can have this explosive damage. So like if you have 5 creatures out, he's at like if you have 5 creatures out plus Nantuko Husk, and he's at like 12 he's at 12 life, you can just kill him, even if they're like all 1/1s. Right. So these are the 2 main selling points of Husk: Carrion Feeder and Nantuko Husk. Also, they deal with tendrils and echoing decay quite nicely because they're sack outlets. Mesmeric Fiend, quite strong. It lets you disrupt their hand, and there's a little trick that you can do is if you have Carrion Feeder out or an Nantuko Husk, I usually prefer to use Carrion Feeder instead of Nantuko, but using Nantuko is quite decent as well. Is if you cast Mesmeric Fiend, and while the Exile's ability is on the stack, you sack it with one of your 2 sack outlets, you can permanently remove one of the cards from the game. So it's like a little bit more expensive, but slightly better duress in a lot of cases, because you basically get to exile a card permanently. But it's also quite good in the sense that it'll usually just attract removal because they want to get their card back. So even if you don't have the permanent exile ability, it's still quite a strong card. Another card that could be there is like Faceless Butcher, but I think the Mesmeric Fiend, it works better just with the sack outlets than the Faceless Butcher would. Vithian Stinger. Yeah, I'm somewhat satisfied with this. It can be good. Usually it's so-so. One thing I've done with it a bunch of times is people don't can't calculate the Stinger plus like Nantuko Husk. So I'll like they'll be at like, let's see, they'll be at 8. I'll have Stinger and Nantuko Husk, and they'll think that they're fine, but they're actually going to die because I'll sting them twice, and each time I sting him, I'm going to use the Nantuko ability to pump him up, so he'll be a 6/6 because he has Unearth, and then I'll basically just win. So I've caught a bunch of people surprised and off guard with this Vithian Stinger. Keldon Marauders, he's quite strong. He does 5 damage if he gets through, and also you can sack him with either Nantuko or Carrion Feeder to power them up the turn after, since he has Vanishing. Mog War Marshals, these are really just a sack outlet for your Carrion Feeder and your Nantuko Husk, because he basically acts as a +6/+6 for your Nantuko Husk if you want to use him that way, or he can act as a permanent +3/+3 to the Carrion Feeder. Alright, so that's the main deck. In the sideboard we have Pyroblast. Not surprising. There's a bunch of blue in this meta. I'll show you. You'll see a couple in it, and Pyroblast is quite a strong spell, so Always happy to have it. Duress, I've been waffling between Duress and Edict, but I think this deck is has less trouble with decks like aggro decks than it does with control decks or specific control decks like combo decks. So that's why I think Duress needs to be in the sideboard. Ingot Chewer, he was originally put in there to deal with Affinity, but there's a couple other decks in this meta that he's quite strong against. And Nausea, this is mainly just for White Weenie. Usually, surprisingly, you don't see any Storm. So if you like hate playing Storm, Peasant's like a good format for you to play. And the reason he's for White Weenie is that he can kill Crimson Acolyte, he can kill this Nausea can kill Obsidian Acolyte, and he can kill the Knight of something. I forget what it is, but it's a 2/1 with protection from black. So usually I've blown people out with this. Oh, and he can kill the Bodyguard that gives protection to of any color, and he can also kill the Rebel that can summon other rebels. So yeah, Nausea can blow out games. Alright, so that's the deck tech.